The Miami Hurricanes have not one, but two former players about to go into the Pro Football Hall of Fame.
You are Locked On Canes, your daily podcast on the Miami Hurricanes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy Friday. We made it. I'm Alex Donno. I'm a University of Miami alumnus, longtime South Florida sports radio vet, and contributor to allhurricanes.com. Thank you so much to the everydayers for making Locked On Canes your first listen and your first watch. We're free wherever you get your podcasts, and we're free on YouTube. We're part of the awesome Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. New customers join today, and you'll get $200 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. I'm so proud of Andre Johnson and Devin Hester. It was announced last night at the NFL Awards ceremony. This is all part of the festivities leading up to the Super Bowl on Sunday. They've got all sorts of events in Vegas. Andre Johnson, Devin Hester are part of the 2024 Pro Football Hall of Fame class. I had the privilege of watching both of these guys play in person in orange and green. I went to school with Devin Hester, the most electric special teams player I've ever laid eyes on, okay? You remember that. I think it was a Thursday night game when he scored that ridiculous punt return touchdown against Louisville. I was at the game, and then I watched back the TV call with Mike Tirico just losing his mind. Devin Hester, his first special teams touchdown, first kick return touchdown was in that 2003 game against Florida, which ended up being the crazy Miami comeback. But first kick return, Hester took that one to the house, and it was insane. And you remember, guys, going to games, and this was at the Orange Bowl, and God, I missed that building so much. But you'd go to games at the Orange Bowl, and every time the other team was about to kick or about to punt, not only did you know something special was about to happen when Hester got his hands on that football, but everybody in the Orange Bowl used to go, Hester, 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 because something electric was about to go down. I can think about Devin Hester's Miami career, and for as incredible as he was at the U, how many return touchdowns did he have here? I think he had 6. Here's from MiamiHurricanes.com. During his time with the Canes, Hester finished with 6 return touchdowns, including career-high 3 during a breakout 2004 campaign where he was named first-team All-American by Walter Camp in the Sporting News. So he had 6 special teams touchdowns at Miami. I think my only regret from the Hester era was I was just so frustrated that Larry Coker and his staff, they couldn't figure out proper ways to use him on offense or defense. Special teams, you knew he's going to get his hands on the football. He's going to take it to the house or give you incredible field position. But I thought that they should have found ways to use him more on offense. I thought they insisted on the defensive back thing a little bit too much. Use him on offense. Just get him the football in space because the guy was grease lightning. He could take anything to the house. And Hester, of course, this is the Pro Football Hall of Fame, so he's getting selected based on what he did in the NFL. Second-round pick by the Chicago Bears in 2006. Greatest returner in NFL history. He set records for most punt returns for touchdowns with 14 and the most special teams touchdowns overall with 20. He had 5 kickoff returns, 14 punt returns, and he returned a missed field goal for a touchdown. He was a 4-time Pro Bowler. So Devin Hester, congratulations. And then, man, what can I even say about Andre Johnson? Andre Johnson was a track star at Miami in addition, and so was Hester, by the way. Track star at Miami, Andre, in addition to being 6'3", about 225 pounds, strong as an ox, but deceptively fast for a guy of his size. How did you cover Andre Johnson? I mean, Andre, he was everything. He could be a possession guy. He could be a deep threat. There are so many touchdowns he scored at Miami and in the NFL where he was running over people en route to the end zone. How did you cover a guy with, first of all, the route running of his, not to mention someone who is basically the size of a receiving tight end, but moves like a receiver, 30, 40 pounds lighter than what he was. I mean, Andre Johnson was just absolutely incredible. I guess the only regret you would have about Andre's tenure is he really deserved to win more national championships than he did at Miami. He got the ring in 2001, and he played great in that Rose Bowl game in 2001 to win the title against Nebraska. But, he was on the team in 2000, didn't play much in 2000, but, Miami should have at least been in the title game in 2000. They were robbed of that opportunity by the BCS. And then in 2002, they were robbed by a referee. That should have been Andre Johnson's at least second national championship at the University of Miami. In his time in Miami, he basically 2 years where he played considerably, 2001 and 2002. He had 92 catches for 1,831 yards, including a 1,000-yard season in 2002. At the time, that was the fifth highest career total at Miami. He averaged 19.9 yards per reception. That's insane. 20 yards basically per reception. Scored 20 receiving touchdowns at Miami, which was the third most in school history at that time. And he also was a track star, as I mentioned. 2002, he won the Big East 60-meter dash in the Big East Indoor Championship, and then won the 100-meter dash at the Big East Outdoor Championship. So almost as accomplished as a track star as he was as a football player. Okay, so all right. Look at this now, where Miami stands with Pro Football Hall of Famers. Pretty impressive for, a small private school that didn't really become nationally relevant until the 80s in terms of contending for championships and all that stuff. Miami Hurricanes are now tied for third nationally with 11 Pro Football Hall of Famers. They're tied with Michigan for third nationally. Here's some perspective on Miami putting players into the Pro Football Hall of Fame. Hurricanes now have 11 Hall of Famers. Florida State and Florida combine for 7. Florida State's got 5, Florida's got 2. Combined 7 compared to Miami's 11. All right, so hopefully Miami can reach a point where, they start actually producing national championship caliber teams. Miami is still putting players into the NFL. Hopefully more Hall of Famers to come in the near future. Because it's pretty impressive. And so here are the Hall of Famers that Miami now has, Pro Football Hall of Fame. And I'm definitely going up to Canton in August to see the induction. I'm already planning my trip to see the official induction of Andre Johnson and Devin Hester. So they join Edgerrin James, Ted Hendricks, Michael Irvin, Jim Kelly, Cortez Kennedy, Ray Lewis, Jim Otto, Ed Reed, and Warren Sapp. 11 Pro Football Hall of Famers. Congratulations to Andre Johnson. Congratulations to Devin Hester. And folks, we are only getting started on this Friday episode of Locked On Canes. I want to talk about the name that's starting to get talked about more than the others for the new potential DB's coach at the University of Miami. That's a vacancy the Hurricanes are going to need to fill. I think there are a handful of names Miami's going to go after. A lot of these names we won't hear about because the loafers move in silence, but a name that's starting to be talked about more than the others. Unfortunately, in recruiting, Miami did miss out on an offensive tackle yesterday. Didn't surprise me too much, but we will talk about that. Obviously, it's not over till National Signing Day 2025, and I'm going to be answering you guys' questions as well on the Locked On Canes Insiders chat. So we are only getting started, my friends. You know what you want to do? You want to keep it locked right here on this brand new Friday episode of Locked On Canes. And I know you're keeping it locked to FanDuel, especially this week of all weeks, guys. We got Super Bowl Sunday coming up. Happy Super Bowl to those who celebrate from FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. If you're like me, Super Bowl Sunday is about scoring the best seat on the couch, grabbing your favorite football snacks, and placing some super bets. FanDuel has so many ways for you to end the season with a W or 2 or 3, because not only can you bet on who's going to win Super Bowl 58, I like the Chiefs at +2.5. I'm going to lock that in. I feel like they're going to win the game outright. FanDuel also has bets for which players will score a touchdown. You guys know I like Travis Kelce at anytime touchdown scorer. I jumped on that when it was even money +100. It's now -105, but I still think there's value there on Kelce. You can bet on how many points will be scored and so much more. And new customers, join today and you'll get $200 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to sign up. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Thank you so much for making this episode of Locked On Canes your first listen and your first watch today. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Guys, Locked On Sports Today is the first ever 24/7 streaming sports YouTube channel launched by this network, Locked On. Check out Locked On Sports Today on YouTube, and you can always find national experts who cover every league or local experts like myself covering every team, bringing you the big-time information and the important things to know. I'm sure that on the channel today, Locked On Sports Today, there's going to be coverage on the Hall of Fame class. There's going to be previews for the Super Bowl coming up. Check it all out at Locked On Sports Today on YouTube. Okay, so we're going to be answering questions from you guys from our Locked On Canes Insiders chat. If you want to join, you can click the link in the show description below. Try it free for 14 days, and then if you like it, $4.99 a month if you want to opt in after that. All right, so we get a question. A lot of people are asking about defensive backs coaches, all right? We get a question from, I think this is from the 786. They didn't sign their name on this one, but it says, if we're not going after DeMarcus Van Dyke, why wouldn't Mario make a play for Patrick Surtain? That would be a big blow against Florida State. I figure he would love being back in Miami. Now, okay, the DVD part you're referencing is, maybe it will be DVD, but I get the sense that Miami still thinks that DeMarcus needs a little bit more experience as a defensive backs coach. He's at USF right now, and that eventually he could come home, but maybe now is not the time. Now, on the Patrick Surtain part of it, let me be completely clear on this. I don't have any reason to believe he's not happy at Florida State. I mean, he's just brought in a heck of a defensive back group, including grabbing Earl Little as a transfer and our old pal Devontae Brown is a transfer who he coached at American Heritage, and he's making a lot of money there. He's making $700,000 a year at Florida State. So the Florida State fans, every time they see me talk about Patrick Surtain, they're like, "What are you Miami fans talking about? You're delusional. You're not." I don't have any reason to believe he's thinking of leaving Florida State, but folks, the reasons why we bring up Patrick Surtain, call it pie in the sky, call it fantasy, whatever you want to say. Given his South Florida ties with American Heritage and playing so many years for the Miami Dolphins, he loves living in South Florida. Obviously, Miami is in need of a defensive backs coach, so it's probably a call you make just to see if he's interested at all. I don't know if he is or isn't, but obviously that's, when you're trying to go after the best people, that's one of the best people you can go after. But I don't have any reason to believe that Patrick Surtain is going to be the next defensive backs coach at Miami. We get this one from Hurricane Keys, who asks, hey, two-part question here. He says, with the loss of Jamil Adai, and yeah, that's Miami's former DB's coach, has gone to the pros. He's going to coach the corners at Buffalo Bills. Says, with the loss of Adai, how do you think that impacts recruiting? He says, looking at his recruiting grades he's talking about, he was mid at best, but he did get some guys in the league. He said, who is the next coach to push us over the top for the 5-star lockdown corners that we need so bad in 2025, he says. So, okay, so as far as losing Jamil Adai, I'm not going to say he wasn't a good recruiter because, I talked to some of the defensive backs he recruited. He made a real connection with some guys like Isaiah Thomas, one of the safeties in Miami's class of 2024. I interviewed him, within the last 6 months or so. And I remember he told me that he and Adai really connected. They have kind of common West African heritage, and they were able to bond over certain things. So, but at the same time, you nailed it. His recruiting grades weren't stellar. I view Jamil Adai as more of a coach than a recruiter, more of a developer than a recruiter. And that's probably why he realized, if I get an opportunity at the NFL, I need to take it, because there at the NFL, you can just coach, right? You don't have to recruit when you're coaching cornerbacks in the NFL. So he can just take that part of the job out of it completely. So I don't necessarily think losing Jamil Adai hurts you so much from a recruiting standpoint. Obviously, it depends on who you replace him with. You need to try to replace him with an even more impactful recruiter. But I think, if anything, you run the risk of losing some development, because yes, he did help Tyreek Stevenson and DJ Ivey improve their draft stock, and Cam Kinchins and James Williams, who he coached for the last 2 seasons, are about to get drafted So you're definitely, at least on paper, losing some development. As far as who the next guy might be, and that's why, okay, I want to bring up the name that's getting talked about now over the last 24 hours more than any others, and that is Chevis Jackson, who's currently coaching the defensive backs at Marshall. Chevis Jackson, he's the cornerbacks coach and co-defensive coordinator at Marshall. And as you probably figured out by now, there is a Lance Guidry connection. He worked under Lance Guidry in 2022. In 2022, that was the year that Marshall had just for that program, a generational defense, one of the best defenses in the country that year. And they upset Notre Dame with a great defensive performance, including a couple of interceptions from their defensive backs in that game. So Chevis Jackson has a good reputation. He already knows Lance Guidry very well. He's been at Marshall for the past 2 seasons. Prior to that, he spent 3 seasons at Kansas. He was coaching cornerbacks for Les Miles when Les was at Kansas. He played for Les Miles at LSU and was, I think, an all-SEC cornerback at LSU. He played 4 seasons in the NFL. So Chevis Jackson played the position at a high level, had success playing the position, seemingly has had success coaching cornerbacks. And if he does come here, I'm not saying he's getting the job, I don't know, but this is a candidate being talked about a lot. If he does come here, he would focus more on the cornerbacks, and Lance Guidry, the defensive coordinator, spends a lot of hands-on time with the safeties. He focuses more on the safeties, so I think the working dynamic could be pretty good there, and Jackson seems to be the name coming up a lot. Now, here's what I don't know as much about, guys. I don't know as much about Jackson as a recruiter. I assume if he's even in the conversation here, he's probably a good and successful recruiter, because that's a non-starter for Mario Cristobal. You wouldn't consider anyone who's not a good recruiter, but with Jackson, I don't know how much experience he has recruiting this area of the country. For example, you were asking about other names. A name that I really like, I don't know if he'd be interested, but Nick Monroe, who's at Minnesota, who's there. He's there, I think, associate head coach or associate something and cornerbacks coach in Minnesota. He had previously spent 7 years at Syracuse, and his region of the country that he recruited was South Florida. So Nick Monroe, who does a good job in Minnesota, good job at Syracuse previously. He's got a lot of experience and connections recruiting down here. I don't know if Chevis Jackson has that, but, I'm learning more about him, and, he could be a good option if Guidry and Cristobal like him. I'd still like to think DeMarcus Van Dyke could be an option, but it's a great question, and Chevis Jackson has now become the guy that gets talked about more than the others. We get a question from Maryland Kane, who says, I noticed that Alonzo Highsmith, when he made his statement that was like, his sort of thank you to Miami when he left a couple days ago to join the New England front office, when he made a statement, he did not include Mario Cristobal by name, Maryland Kane says. Do you think there's any bad blood? And if so, will this negativity affect South Florida recruiting because of how well respected Highsmith is? I think you're reading hopefully too much into that, Maryland Kane. And it's a good observation by you, because I didn't notice that he didn't mention Mario Cristobal by name. Did they potentially, when it comes to, clashing scouting reports and personnel, did they potentially butt heads a little bit? Maybe, but at the end of the day, it's all love between the two of those guys. Like, trust me, if there were any squabbles between Cristobal and Alonzo Highsmith, I'd like to believe it's like the type of squabbles that siblings will sometimes have and family members. I think it's all love there, because one of the specific things that was reported after Highsmith decided to leave Miami, even the Miami Herald came out and said that he and Cristobal leave on good terms, right? That I don't think Highsmith left because he hated Cristobal's guts. I think, maybe part of the reason why he left was he didn't really have the most defined role down here. And he's also, his roots are in the NFL, because Alonzo Highsmith for more than 2 decades was working in NFL front offices. But, you read a lot into that. I hope you read too much into that, because I don't have any reason to believe there's bad blood. As far as recruiting, first of all, Alonzo's never going to be sowing any sort of negative. Alonzo's not going to start bad mouthing Miami behind the scenes. That's just, he loves the U more than anything. So, I mean, I guess the only way this could affect recruiting is you're losing Highsmith's evals, right? Like you're losing his scouting. You no longer have that voice in the room when you're, at football camps, because Alonso was very involved in scouting players at these in-person camps. So you're losing that from the equation. At the same time, Mario Cristobal was a hell of a recruiter before he and Highsmith ever started working together. We get this question from Trey. Hey, Donno, long-winded question, but who are some names that we're looking at as potential cornerback coach? I think I did lay some of those out. And also, do you think the staff is going to factor in that he needs to be an elite recruiter? Not saying Adai wasn't, but in his 2 years, we only landed one blue chip corner and we're never in competition for the good to elite ones anyhow. So how do you feel about how we should address the no-fly zone, Trey says? And yeah, listen, you're not completely wrong about Adai. I think Jamil Adai, you could say more of an actual developer, because a really good coach, which makes sense that he's going to the NFL, because you go to the Bills, you don't have to recruit anymore. You just have to coach. Like you just have to go out there and make your defensive backs better, which is what he excelled more at in Miami. He helped obviously DJ Ivey and Tyreek Stevenson improve their draft stock and get drafted last year. He's about to have James Williams and Cam Kinchins drafted, who he's helped coach for the last 2 years at Miami. So there's something to be said about Adai as a coach and a developer, but he did have some misses in recruiting, no question. And yeah, I think honestly, for any Mario Cristobal staff being a good, hopefully elite recruiter, that is a must. And that's part of this that Mario is going to try to hopefully upgrade when he brings in the next guy. In terms of, you ask how losing Adai is going to affect recruiting, it's nice to see a guy Miami's recruiting heavily, top player in the state of Florida, DJ Pickett, defensive back from Zephyr Hills. He already sent out a tweet or an X post saying that it's still all about the U for him. Like, Miami's considered to be one of the trending leaders in his recruitment, and it doesn't seem like Jamil Adai's departure is impacting his recruitment very much. But it's going to depend on who Miami gets. Like when you're talking about, is Miami going to have the year where they're landing blue chippers, guys like DJ Pickett and guys like Chris Ewald, who Miami's trending very well for, the cornerback out of American Heritage? You're going to need to bring in the right coach to help close those recruitments, because those are players I still believe, especially Ewald, are trending pretty nicely in Miami's direction. You need to make sure your next cornerbacks coach is a guy who can close the deal, because yes, if you look at, I don't necessarily think Miami has any weak point on the roster, but the defensive backfield, it's more of a question mark right now than a lot of other places. You need to do a bang-up job recruiting those spots. We have more questions to answer from you guys when we come back. Another name of a safety who's on Miami's roster that we don't talk about enough. What does it mean that Miami's losing coaches and administrators to the NFL? Can we spin that as a positive? Someone wants Shannon Dawson to get advice from Mike McDaniel. Folks, we're not done yet. You want to keep it locked right here on this brand new Friday episode of Locked On Canes. And thank you so much for making Locked On Canes your first listen and your first watch today. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And for the everydayers, you notice on this episode, we're answering questions from our Locked On Canes insiders. If you want to become a Locked On Canes insider, you can ask me one-on-one questions. I give you guys breaking news, recruiting scoops, all sorts of show updates on there. You could try it free by clicking the link in the show description below. Become a Locked On Canes insider free for 2 weeks. And then if you like it, after 14 days, you can opt in for $4.99 a month. We give you a lot of added value on there at Locked On Canes Insiders. Question from Eric, who says, do you think Nick Saban's retirement will have an impact in Miami becoming a powerhouse again within the next few years? It can't hurt, Eric. I mean, because here's Nick Saban for, the last, how many years was he at Alabama? 16 years? For the last, decade and a half, he was taking a lot of the top players out of your backyard. We'll see if Kalen DeBoer becomes that sort of a force. Obviously, his more recent connections are out west. But Saban was, the way Brian Hartline haunts us at Ohio State. Saban was a big time thorn in our side in recruiting. So hypothetically, maybe you can keep more players home. And yes, there is one less great coach in college football right now. I think Georgia has kind of become that recruiting dynasty that Alabama used to be under Kirby Smart. But listen, taking Saban out of the national landscape, it cannot hurt, okay? It can only help Miami's chances and also, Florida State's chances and other teams that are trying to become national powerhouses again. We get a question from Dat Dude 239 who says, hey, does losing coaches to the NFL show the world that Miami is on the rise? He says, I would like to think so. Listen, Jamil Adai doesn't get the offer to become the Bills cornerbacks coach if they didn't think he was doing a good job at Miami. And if they didn't think that Miami's defensive backfield was, somewhat impressive the last couple of years under Adai's tenure. So that's a good thing. The Alonzo Highsmith thing, he was in the NFL for so many years before he went back to the NFL. But I'll say this. If and when Miami becomes a national powerhouse program again, we're trying to get there. We're not there right now. But if Miami becomes that again, you got to get used to losing coaches to promotions. It happens. That's what happens to successful staffs. When you have successful coaching staffs, your guys are going to get poached by NFL teams. That's just how this happens. So, you don't necessarily take it as a negative. And I see some Miami fans who are like, this is chaos. We're losing coaches now. We lost a running backs coach and a defensive backs coach, and Zoe's leaving. Get used to the turnover. I mean, Tim Harris left for a promotion back at UCF. Jamil Adai left for a promotion. Alonzo Highsmith left for an NFL front office job. Like, this is the type of stuff that happens to successful staffs. People get poached for bigger opportunities. Derek says, no one is talking about Caleb Spencer at safety. He's a massive kid. Thoughts? I can tell you, man, I remember Caleb Spencer. If you guys have been watching or listening to my show for, a year plus, I was super impressed with Spencer in spring last year, and I was impressed with him in fall camp. I'm sorry we don't talk about him enough. Now, he's obviously very little to no experience at the college level, was an impressive player coming out of high school last year, really hard hitter. I would like to see him compete for a spot. I think more experienced guys, obviously Mish Powell from Washington, who's a grad transfer, is likely going to lock down a starting job. Maybe Savion Riley from Vanderbilt. But Caleb Spencer is definitely one of the guys on the roster now, in addition to players like Markeith Williams, who can, and Jaden Harris, who can definitely compete for spots at safety. So I don't want to sleep on Caleb Spencer. You're right to bring him up. Get a question from T, who says, hey, do you think Shannon Dawson can talk to Mike McDaniel about putting some of the faster players on the field together for the mismatches? You know what? I would love for that conversation to go down, right? I mean, why not? When you have Chris Johnson and Chris Wheatley Humphrey, like, why not try to get these guys on the field with each other, get them on the field there more often? When you've got guys with bona fide track speed, I don't hate that idea. I will also add that as a Dolphin fan, in addition to a Hurricanes fan, I would like Mike McDaniel to maybe pick Mario Cristobal's brain about getting more physical players on the field. I think they can learn from each other. I think the Hurricanes can learn a little bit more finesse from Mike McDaniel. Maybe Mike McDaniel can learn some more physical philosophies from the Miami Hurricanes, and we can all just make each other better. Okay, that was a fun question. We get a question from Big Canes fan who says, what position group are you most interested in seeing perform at the spring game? If I said anything other than quarterback, I'd be lying. I mean, I want to watch Cam Ward. I want to watch Cam Ward in the spring game. I want to watch Poffenbarger. I want to watch Jakari Brown again to see how much more he's improving. I don't know for sure if Emory Williams is going to be available for spring. Judd Anderson, if he plays, he'll probably get some PT in the spring game. It's definitely quarterback for me. Like, obviously, you guys, I could talk for hours about every position group and who I'd like to see, but number one for me is quarterback, because we're going to go out, we're going to get to watch Cam Ward slinging it in front of fans for the first time in a Miami uniform. That's going to be a lot. It's going to be a lot of fun. We get a question from LL Cool Matt from Bama. This is a really good question. He says, hey, with the almost complete landscape change in college football, with an inept NCAA that is now allowing unlimited transfers and no limit NIL, we are witnessing dynasties like Alabama start to lose depth on their rosters. Oddly enough, Miami is finally starting to build depth, he says. Do you see this as a sustainable thing for Miami under these rules, or do you think Mario will start having issues losing higher rated guys as well? That's an excellent question, because right now the NCAA landscape, you're right, it's chaos, right? And like I said, I'm happy players can get paid because they have deserved to get paid for, for decades, centuries, but there's a lot of chaos that's coming with it, and the transfer rules are ridiculous right now. So it's creating chaos all over, Matt, but I do think Miami can thrive in this environment of chaos compared to a lot of other schools. Because, okay, something you notice, not all the time, but a lot of the time, when players transfer, a common theme is players who initially went far from home to school tend to transfer closer to home when they get that second opportunity. So right there, that can help Miami bring South Florida talent back, who they initially missed out on, right? Henry Parrish was one of those guys who started his career away from home. He came back home to South Florida. Also, a lot of transfers tend to shop for better NIL situations when they transfer, and I have reason to believe Miami is top 5 in the country with their NIL situation, according to my knowledge of the landscape. So that can help Miami as well. Now, this environment of chaos, it's not ideal for anybody, but I think Miami can probably thrive in that chaos a little bit more than others can. As always, had more questions I wanted to get to, but I talked too darn much. If I can answer some more of these questions in a future episode, I'm going to keep them in the hopper. I hope everyone has a happy Friday. Congratulations to Andre Johnson and Devin Hester. Oh, I do want to mention, by the way, I put it in the headliner, so let me mention this. Miami is not getting Owen Strebig, the 6'8" offensive lineman out of Wisconsin. As expected, he chose the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. He had a top 5, but Notre Dame and Miami were in his own words, his top 2. He chose to go to Notre Dame. On to the next one. And also, let's remember, it's not over till National Signing Day, but Miami has missed out on Owen Strebig, at least for now. We'll talk to everyone again next time on another episode of Locked On Canes. We are part of the awesome Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.